Welcome, guys. So, tonight I am going to take you on the third part of our journey, and that is gold goes, PJ's rule, downhill, okay, downstream, down to bedrock. Tonight we're going to talk about gold going to bedrock and mud flows and lahars and other fancy words, okay? So, just hang on, buckle up. We're going to talk about this stuff. Hi, I'm Prospector Jess. I'm here to help you find more gold. So the purpose of this thing tonight is to kind of explore the last part of our journey for gold. It actually doesn't end going down to bedrock, okay? Ideally, I mean not ideally, but ultimately, it's down to the ocean, okay? That's where this stuff is going. It just has to, okay? Gravity draws it down that slope. Okay, that same slope that drives water to the ocean. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is kind of what happens when it gets downhill and then into the stream. Well, once it enters the stream, it's got to go where? Down further. It goes until it can go no further because what's driving it? Gravity. So let's take a look at that and what that's all about. I hope you're having a great weekend. I got out today for the first time in a long time, okay, and had a lot of fun trimming trees of all things. But anyway, I managed not to get too much damage done, although I did cut my cord. That was pretty interesting. Oh, shoot, can't do that. So let's look at this thing. I'm going to go to the chalkboard for a moment. Hope everybody's got a good audio thing going here. Let me make sure we got. You can tell me if I'm not. Comment below. So the objective here is to kind of look at what we're talking about. Well, first thing, let's just take a look at this whole downhill, down, whatever, okay? So we got our gold, and it's up somewhere in the, we'll call it up in the alpine region. So it's up at the top of the hill. And that gold is just going to sit there unless acted upon by other forces. So Newton's law, okay? But one of those forces is the force of gravity acting on the gold's sheer mass that gives rise to a thing we call weight. That weight drives it down toward the center of the earth. And so what ends up happening is this guy takes a journey. First step, he kind of goes downhill, okay? And we've talked about that for a bit, and then it continues downhill until it hits the stream bed. The current stream bed. Now here's the funny part. That's one of many stream beds over the history of whatever this is. So as the water here, let me get watercolor. As the water is flowing downstream, that gold hits that material, and the next thing it's going to want to do, I'm going to change colors here and show you in green. The next thing the gold wants to do is it wants to go down to the bottom of this stream bed as fast as it can. Now, why is that? Same thing, gravity. But there's something blocking the way. What might that be? Hint, look at the title, okay? The title of this tonight's episode. Down to bedrock, mud, okay? So what prevents the gold from going to the bottom? Well, if the water is pure, it's going to go to the bottom like plink, it goes very fast. But in a flood, not so much. And we'll explain that in a second here. I got several things I want to go through to show you that. And I might even end up spending some time over on the whiteboard, although we'll see. But the thing is, this area down in here is where the gold will concentrate ultimately. This is where the gold is going to go and concentrate, and this is where you want to be able to sleuth it out. Now, that doesn't mean it isn't concentrated on a slope. Check some of my other episodes in this same series, the last 3 shows, and look to see what I have to say about where it might go along this path, okay? But down in here, it's going to go to this thing we call bedrock. Now, what is bedrock? Well, bedrock is any solid interface that basically lacks the ability for gold to break through and penetrate in a flood or in an earthquake, anything that might disturb that bottom, okay? If something disturbs that bottom, say opens it up and makes the cracks bounce around a little bit like a big boulder moving along, or an earthquake, or or a special kind of flood called a lahar. Okay, anything like that that might tear up the bottom could eventually cause the gold to slip down a little further, because it's going to. Now, what that means is then the gold would be found not necessarily on the bedrock, but it might be found in a crack in the bedrock. And this is something a lot of people neglect when they're looking for gold. They forget about the crevices. That's why it's always a good idea to have yourself, bigger than this, but a screwdriver, okay? Or some kind of a L-shaped pry bar, a little pry tool that can allow you to scrape away, doing a thing we call sniping or gold sniping. Now, the beauty of that is you can get down in those cracks, and if those cracks have been there for a while and they've managed to get bounced back and forth, there can be a lot of gold down in there, a little pocket placer, if you will, and that's worth going after. It's also something you can do with a snorkel and a goggles and perhaps a little underwater metal detector. Okay. Also, you can use a above water snorkel, a little sniping tool, that allows you to see the bottom and kind of magnify or upside down periscope, looking at the bottom through a tube that's basically without water in it, but it allows you to see through the bottom, which has a little lens in it. And all those things are available. Go check them out. But the beauty is that you can find these little cracks and you can exploit them. And by the way, the people in the 1930s, that was one way they made do when there was not much money. They would actually do a lot of crevicing, and a lot of gold in the gold country was found doing just that. So you might check it out if you're looking for something fun to do. It's a blast in the summertime when it's hot. You just kind of snorkel around and look and pry away and chip away and pull the cobbles out and see what's under them. Just be careful you don't pull out too big a cobble and pinch yourself and get stuck underwater. That's not a good thing. So this is the deal. The gold is going to go down there, and it's going to go find these traps and so forth, and it's going to go down at the bottom. Now, does it stay at the bottom forever? No, because there's still water flowing along that bottom, so it can continue to move, like I said, all the way to the ocean. Could even go into the ocean and deposit on the ocean and get moved into areas we call underwater canyons, okay, and follow slurries of mud and sand that follow the coastlines and down into these deep, deep water canyons, eventually going into the outer reaches of the continental shelf, and eventually getting recycled when the continental shelf and the good old-fashioned spreading ridges kind of dive under the coast and create earthquakes and mountains and volcanoes. Oh my. Okay, so that whole thing is part of this picture, but we're just talking about when it hits the water, it's going to dive. Why is that going to happen? Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about.